we're here to give you the inside look at Ken Roczen's 2022 HRC Honda CRF450R. This is Ken's 6th year with the HRC Honda team and the 2nd year with what is the 2nd generation bike he has rode since he's been with the team. So after a year of developing this bike, racing it, definitely some unique things to look at and see what Ken's been doing with the setup on this bike as he's had a little bit more experience and time to dial it in. Some of the first things that stood out to us about this bike is not the trick parts or the bling or the billets. It's the items they've actually decided to keep stock now. Looking at Ken's bike going into this year, they have reverted to a lot of stock hardware on the machine to try to just keep the aspects of the bike that are good stock, to try not to change the rigidity, the flex, make things harsher. With that, we've noticed that the kit forks have gone to a cast production lug, albeit they've anodized them black to kind of keep your eyes away from it per se. All the mounting hardware on this bike, from a solid mounting point, from the engine, like the top engine hangers, front engine hangers, the bolts that go underneath through the cradle, your swing arm pivot, your axle, all those bolts and nuts on this bike are standard hardware, no tie, all standard steel components. Once again, they're just, I guess really at this point, trying to maintain that stock feel. That seems to be where Ken and Chase both like it, as we've noticed it with both of the machines while we were filming this. Now don't get us wrong, in places that really don't change the rigidity character of the bike, we're seeing plenty of titanium, like all over the engine case bolts, the plastic hardware, everything that really doesn't create stress on the bike, they've gone to tie hardware to try to reduce the overall weight of the machine. As for the engine, Honda keeps this stuff close to their chest. We do know, of course, that the piston, the crank, the rod, the cam are all different in this bike, but nothing in here is really built to make the bike a fire breather. The comments we've heard from the team is that the Honda already has a really aggressive character stock. They're actually trying to make it easier to ride at times for Ken and Chase, and they're trying to make that character just broader. They're looking for a little bit more on each end and just trying to make the bike as linear as possible and make it so the guys have to shift it as little as possible. That seems to be kind of what every team does with a 450 these days. And simple, that's what makes the bike the most rideable and allows these guys to ride them as hard as possible. Some of the components we are aware of inside the motor is a complete Hinson clutch on the bike, albeit we've seen, depending on the rider's comment, we've seen a mix of Hinson billet components and stock cast components. Once again, just depending on the exact clutch feel they're looking for, they have so many options to try. And when it comes down to manipulating the power of the 450, this is something that can change between Supercross rounds, it can change between Supercross and outdoors, and just as they learn more about the bike or as the rider just kind of gets a little bit different feeling through the season. The electronics on the bike have changed. The entire wiring harness on the bike is redone for multiple reasons. It is changed to make it easier to disassemble the bike, where everything is routed and held on the motorcycle when these guys have to do quick engine swaps or just rebuild their bikes every week. The connectors are beefed up for when they're constantly taking it apart, and then they add multiple locations to add in data, whether they need to add things such as a GPS location on the bike, they need to add an actual module that records all this data, and even adding certain sensors that aren't in the stock harness. Something interesting the Honda team has done in the electronics is they have reverted from the massive kill switch, launch control, change everything button on the bike that we saw on this generation and gone to a little bit more simplified mode and kill switch that was on the last generation bike, albeit it's been modified even further. They've basically gone through and sealed it to protect it against water and have added a little bit of a cover over it so the guys can't accidentally hit the kill or mode switch, you know, when yanking a tear off and just putting their hands back on the bars. This bike has a host of works components on it from HRC, such as the hubs on the bike, the billet Nissan brake caliper, the hanger that holds it, the foot pegs, the foot peg rest or mounts, and even the shifter, which is made of titanium on this motorcycle. Similar to the 250, we've heard that for the overall geometry of the bike at the front end, they've tried to stay towards stock. The stock axle and lugs tell us they haven't modified anything down below on the bike, and then up at the triple clamps, we believe they're still on 22mm offset, same as stock, and we believe they're on stock rake on this motorcycle, albeit that will likely change come outdoors where they have a few other options that suit the chassis better in more high-speed conditions. The linkage and bell crank on this motorcycle are made completely to HRC specifications, something they've been targeting for the last year with this chassis, and now that they have the 250 guys on it, they've learned kind of the same thing even on that end with the Lawrences on it, is the guys are looking to get the bike to squat a little bit more naturally. They don't want it on throttle to climb out of the stroke as easy. They just want it to a little bit more subtly settle into the stroke. We know that is one of the goals they're trying to accomplish with this different linkage and bell crank. And beyond that, they're probably changing the middle to end of the curve as well to suit their specific suspension needs. The team does have an in-house suspension engineer along with multiple technicians from Showa that assist with the development, rebuilds, and just overall taking care of the suspension on both Ken Roczen and Chase Sexton's bikes. Other than the stock lugs, the forks are what they call kit forks. We do have different coatings on the upper and lower tubes, different Tai Nitrate and Kashima coatings. The cartridge and damping rod are actually, if not the same as stock, extremely close. The way the mid-speed valve bleeds off, many other things about this are very similar to the current 2022 production fork. Other than some bling here and there and some more sensitive adjusters, you know, a different actual valving stack and piston for Supercross use, maybe spring perches, a lot of the mainstay, just bare bones of the suspension is not that different than the bike mirror you would buy off the showroom floor. Going for the shock, somewhat similar comments. Yes, it has a billet clevis. It does have an 18mm shock shaft instead of 16mm, which is mostly for Supercross reasons. And then the body itself is two-piece, the lower half being billet machine and the top half being forged. The frame and swing arm on this bike appear to be stock, but as we know with AMA rules, it is legal to gusset certain areas of this frame. We cannot remove material from the frames and be legal, but these teams can go in and add little corner welds and add material in certain places as they need be. This is something the team has been playing with a lot on this generation bike we've heard. We don't know where exactly they've ended up. Once again, between Supercross and outdoors, there's different feelings these guys could be looking for. This thing could be as stock as your or my bike, or it may have some small modifications that we are unable to see, but are still completely legal by today's rule book. The Yoshimura RS12 exhaust system on this bike is extremely close to the production one that you can buy, but it is still tweaked for the team's usage. It is handmade by one individual in-house, where the rest of the parts usually come off a normal assembly line, and small things such as the resonance chamber are added, sometimes the can length and the core size is changed, all depending on the engine package and just the fine details of what they're looking for. Not necessarily saying this exhaust is better than the one off the showroom floor, but it's adapted specifically to their engine package. The brake rotors front and rear on this bike are actually stock and of stock size, 240mm in the rear, 260mm in the front, with the added power or feel coming from the billetness and caliper that they utilize. The master cylinder on the front brake for a long time has been a different component with HRC. It's been based off a mid-90s CR252 stroke that's been modified. This item is now the stock production master cylinder. I found that quite interesting after Honda's always kept kind of the same brake combination that they went away from in the last year, preferring the new production part. Kenny is the only member of the HRC Honda team on twin wall Renthal handlebars. The rest of the team is on the Renthal fat bar, such as the Lawrences, and we've seen Chase Sexton play with the fat bar along with, I believe, the 36 Renthal fat bar that came out a little over a year ago. Kenny has over time adopted back to the twin wall, as we saw him originally run back when he was with Red Bull KTM in Europe and his early part of his 250 career. The gearing on the bike is interesting, as it has a 14-tooth front sprocket up one tooth from stock and a 51 rear. Now, not to say just throwing that combination on your bike is going to have the exact same effect, as the HRC operation, of course, has options internal in the gear box that we don't have as the public. They can change first gear to be longer, so the guys can hit triples right out of corner in first gear as needed, and we've heard that's been a very common option they'll run. And they're able to tweak the final position of second, third, and fourth, you know, bring them a little closer together, a little bit farther apart, and bring this all together with the final external ratio you see to get the exact power character that the guys are looking for. Again, biggest thing this day is broad power and trying to make each gear last as long as possible. A few things we notice for durability reasons: it does have a large coverage carbon fiber skid plate, which is made by CMT USA, not to be confused with CMT Italy. The guy who actually owns this company makes underwater camera housings to protect cameras when they're deep underwater, and he's actually a member of the Vital MX Forum. Another durability related item on this bike is the water pump spigot. On the stock part, it is actually, the spigot is pressed into the water pump housing. This part, it looks stock for the water pump housing, but it isn't. It has a little bit of an area where you can bolt down the flange that has instead been welded to the spigot. The reason for this is if it's a mud race, the radiators get packed, the water pressure gets hot and builds in the bike, it can actually push the stock spigot up and out of that water pump. So this is just a little bit of item that the Honda team does to ensure that their bike finishes the race. This was a preseason look at Ken's bike, so we wouldn't be surprised if we show up at A1 and they've tweaked a thing or two on the motorcycle or maybe added some new parts they've developed. And of course, that happens all year long. If you want to learn more about these changes race to race, make sure you check out Pit Bits on our site at vitalmx.com. We do it at every single race. We go through the pits and scour for the latest tech, the newest parts, the coolest helmets and everything to keep you up to date. Thanks for watching this inside look at Ken Roczen's 2022 Honda HRC CRF450R.